This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 485, AI Autonomy. On today's show, we're talking about AI autonomy, how it could help Drupal development, and AI in the future with Jay Callicott. We'll also cover AI agents as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today, our guest is Jay Callicott. Jay has been working with Drupal for almost 20 years, most of that time in the agency space. He's also been an outspoken advocate for AI in development, sharing his thoughts and experiments regularly on LinkedIn. Currently, Jay is building a decoupled starter for Drupal called Drupal X, which leverages AI to help developers build faster. Jay, welcome to the show and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm John Picozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM, and today my co-hosts are joining us for the second week. Scott Weston, Senior Director of the Digital Practice at Bounteous. Is that supposed to say Bounteous Acolyte?
Not as of yesterday.
What?
Yeah, we're bounteous again.
Oh, okay.
My brain.
World.
All right. And last but certainly not least, joining us, Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development.
Happy to be here.
And now, to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted to leverage AI-powered tools to get information about or change the configuration of your website? There's a module for that. It's called AI Agents, and it was created in August of 2024 by Marcus Johansson of FreelyGive. It has a 1.0.1 version available, which supports Drupal 10.3 and 11, and it is actively maintained. In fact, that release was in the past week and was part of the significant effort made to get a stable release of the AI modules that are included in Drupal CMS. It does have security coverage, and there's actually a documentation folder included within the module's codebase. It has 30 open issues, 7 of which are bugs, and it is currently in use by 119 sites, according to Drupal.org, but I suspect that number will increase rapidly once people start using Drupal CMS. Now, in AI terminology, an agent is a system able to interact with its own environment, collect data, and use the data to perform self-determined tasks. The AI Agents module is a framework to provide agents that can provide a variety of functions in your Drupal website. It depends on the AI module that we had Jamie Abrams on the podcast to talk about back in episode 468. The module includes plugins that provide 3 agents, namely a field type agent that can create or edit fields using the field API or answer questions about the fields that your site has defined, a content type agent that can create, edit, or answer questions about node types, and a taxonomy agent that can do the same for your site's vocabularies. Now, anyone who has seen the Dries Note AI demos from DrupalCon Barcelona or Singapore will have seen these agents in action, although in those examples through interaction in a chatbot. Technically, the plugins are UI agnostic, however, so theoretically you could trigger an agent in other ways. Today, however, AI agents power the AI chatbot that you can use in the AI recipe included in the recently released Drupal CMS 1.0. Now, the AI Agents module also includes some submodules. An experimental form integration submodule adds UI elements to the interfaces for managing fields, content types, and vocabularies. An Explorer submodule provides debugging tools, and an experimental extra submodule provides agents for working with web forms and views. I have also seen a demo of some work underway to provide an ECA agent, so you may soon be able to get your Drupal site to build out ECA models based on the business logic you described to it. So let's talk about AI agents.
I would say before we do that, if you haven't, dear listener, seen the AI videos from the Dries Notes, pause now, go watch those, and then come back because they're awesome. The interaction with the AI agents, with the AI bot through chat is like, you're just like, man, I wish building websites was like this all the time.
I will say one thing that I think is recently implemented. It may be in the Singapore Dresno video, but I'm pretty sure it was not in the Barcelona one. Is they've added a review step. So rather than it just going and making changes to your Drupal website, it will actually say these based on what you've told me. Here's what I think I'm going to go ahead and do, and then you basically give it that confirmation step before it actually changes your website.
Yeah, I seem to remember it in Barcelona where it was kind of like, I understood what you said to be this. Is this what you want me to do? And you're like, yes. And you're like, okay, I'm gonna go do it. But maybe there's maybe it's been improved upon. But I mean, I think that I'm interested in seeing how people end up using kind of this framework to like advance that. I think like, I don't know. I feel like there could be like a commerce agent, right? Where it allows you to like interact more specifically with commerce, Drupal commerce and create products, do those sorts of things. I mean, listen, anybody that's worked on a commerce site knows that like creating variants of products is like uber painful. So like if an AI could go do that for you based on like a table of data, that would be 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, I think the two things I'm really excited about, at least from how I understand this module works, is one is having it kind of having the ability to kind of fork the functionality. Because right now, you kind of the way it's built, you kind of say like, I want to trigger on this field, do thing X, right? Do prompt X. But sometimes I already have clients that sometimes want like do thing X if this is true, do thing Y if that is true. And I think with agents, you can kind of have an agent that does both. And I forget what it's called, but something on top of that that helps select which agent to apply to a particular case. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the agent is the one doing the decision. Um, but I think that that's pretty powerful. Um, the other piece, and I didn't hear you say that this was in it yet, but I just want the ability to have it report on and manipulate content on the site. Like what like almost like one of the more painful pieces of maintenance of sites is as the information architecture evolves over years, keeping things kind of in sync and clean. And the ability to be like just occasionally be like, hey, we're introducing this new field architecture thing and deprecating this other one in content, like give me a quick report on how much is affected and what it would look like to automatically apply that. Because of course you can build tools to do that, but if you could just like very quickly um, use some sort of chat interface to be like, hey, we're modifying this vocabulary and splitting it to three. What does that look like? That would save that would have the potential of saving so much time and effort. But
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I did notice on the project page it talks about the taxonomy agent as being able to manipulate. It mentions the vocabularies and terms, so I don't know off the top of my head how much these agents are able to actually work with the instances of either node types or vocabularies, or if it really is configuration only. But I have to think that's something that's got to be coming at some point.
yeah, that'd be powerful.
I saw a demo. Is it Marcus? Yeah, a demo Marcus did where he was having it create terms as well. So it will reach out and get get data. So his example was like soccer players or something. He was writing that. So yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated to check it out. I mean, I've seen the demos. I still, for me, the concept of AI agents is still a little bit fuzzy because it's like it feels like it's more like a spectrum. Like on one side is like super autonomous and doing lots of stuff on its own, versus kind of like maybe a little bit agentic. And so, because when I was looking at the demo, it's like it seems like the chat's like a dispatcher where it's just like, okay, either create a taxonomy, vocabulary, or whatever, or create a content type with fields. And that's kind of it. I mean, you do have confirmation, stuff like that. So it's definitely down the path of agentic. I guess I want to see how much it can do I mean, there's no real limit that's keeping you from making it do more things autonomously. But that's the thing I'd really like to see in a demo or something. If it can do that like right now, or if it's just if it's literally just sort of like a dispatcher where it's just like, okay, do this, okay, it runs off and does that one thing. Okay, now do this. I've built tools like that. I don't know if I would call them agents just yet. Hopefully on that path.
Based on my review, looking at the demos, looking at the code, I saw two really interesting use cases. Nick, you mentioned one, which is kind of bulk managing of content. If someone wants to move a term from one vocabulary to another, everything gets attached. I think that's great. I think another one is almost like a support for training. So for like a new Drupal developer, this AI agent could be really helpful on, oh, we need to make an entity reference. A person might not know what an entity reference is, but being able to tie content to a taxonomy vocabulary and not know how to do that. So the AI agent could help with that. In my brain though, I'm fighting the urge of using it to give up a level of control. So if you're using it to manage your content model, you're giving some control of it, unless you're going to be really prescriptive in your prompts to it, which at that point you might as well, if you're making structure changes to your site, you may just go ahead and do it, and it may be faster in the long run.
I I wonder if there's a way to train these agents to use Talking Drupal as a source, because we have an episode where we talk about when to use a taxonomy versus an entity reference, and that might be an
I would
interesting.
I would suggest that nobody use me for a source for their AI. I'm just throwing that out there. It sounds like a
Well,
terrible idea.
well, we had an expert on to talk about it, and so we could certainly. I think we can rely on Benji Fisher to give
Mhm.
accurate advice on how to architect a site there. So, um, but yeah, I think the thing is, training is interesting. It's just one. I'm wondering how we solve like that specific issue, right? It's really complex sometimes. I mean, sometimes
Mhm.
it's easy, but sometimes it's complex to know when you should use a
Right.
taxonomy reference to tie things together versus just direct references. And and how do you? I mean, this is just a general. Maybe we're getting a little bit too much into the show topic right now for Module of the Week, but how do you ensure that you're um, conveying those principles appropriately and at the appropriate level, right? When somebody's first introduced to the concept, you don't want to be like, well, here's a 6-hour thesis on when to use which. Um, but a way to, I mean, and that's true just in normal training too. Like, how do you parse it or chunk it in a way that it's parsable in small chunks, but let them know that there's more thought that goes into it, the more complex the
Mhm.
use case is.
Right. I mean, in theory, you're setting the rules, like you're fine tuning it or whatever. You're giving it all of you're feeding it like your business rules and all that stuff.
Yeah, I also wanted to touch quickly on the question Scott raised about sort of the potential for this as kind of a learning tool. In the one of the things that I thought was really interesting about the Singapore Dries note was that they actually, in the section on AI, had somebody on from, I want to say it was the University of Edinburgh,
Yes.
who's doing the UX testing for Drupal CMS, and they had done testing of the AI agent without telling people that it was the AI agent that they were testing them on. So it was just sort of getting their, sort of incidental feedback, and it sounds like the feedback was really positive. People maybe found that it took a little bit of getting used to, but as they gave it some of that feedback in terms of which things they want or didn't, that it seemed to really sort of learn exactly how to give them the kind of results that they were after. So certainly from that standpoint, it sounds really, really promising.
I'm gonna reserve my skepticism and my doom and gloom for the show. But I mean, where Scott says, "Huh, it could be a great training tool," I say, "Huh, it could be a great tool not to have to tell a junior developer how to do something and just say, go do this." And
Hmm.
I don't know if the AI does it 95% right, it's better than a junior developer only doing it 75% right, right? And I know I'm going to get so many people that are going to be like, what are you saying? Like, they're not going to love that. But that's kind of where my head went with that statement. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't educate your junior developers. I'm just saying there are going to be people out there that have that point of view.
Mm-hmm. Well, what if it was more, thinking of like the audience for Drupal CMS,
Oh
the
yeah.
people that don't know Drupal, they don't know
Well,
coding, helping them understand how the
yeah.
things are wired together.
I mean, I think that's an excellent way to frame it too, because like when I talk to my development teams about like platformatizing things and like making things easier for users to use, I have to kind of like drench it in the fact that like, guys, this isn't going to reduce the amount of work that you guys have to do. It's just going to change the type of work that you're doing. So now
Mhm.
instead of entity referencing two content types together, right, and saving that into config and putting in a PR and all that stuff, right? Like now a site builder can do that, right, with an AI assistant, and you can go build a new feature. You can build a whole new agent for that AI for them to be able to use, right? Which to me, like in my very small developer brain, feels like a funner problem. Funner is not a word, folks. A problem to solve than to just be like kind of checking boxes and doing the basic Drupal stuff.
Mhm.
All
The
right.
piece I struggle with, I mean, I guess it would be take us into a whole Drupal CMS conversation. I want to withhold some judgment till I evaluate it. It's hard for me to picture like a marketer, non-technical person building out a site that could be a production website. Even if you have the tools, just like Drupal has had so much available in the interface for forever since I started using it. You can do so much that you can't do in other systems, and that's been an advantage of Drupal. But that doesn't necessarily mean like a marketer role is the best one equipped to do that. It's great that they can do that to play around and figure stuff out where that a less technical person can get more done. It's just like, are they really going to be able to do something that winds up in like a live production environment? That's
That
that's
that
a reach for me.
that's a goal. That is the goal. And I think that like when you compare, and we're gonna back up this path and continue on with the show in a minute. But I think like that is the goal, right? That is the promised land. And I think when you look at other platforms like Squarespace or WordPress or whatever, right? Like a marketer could go on to Squarespace and build a website and have it
Yeah.
and put it out and have it be production ready. Like it is a major downfall of Drupal that Drupal doesn't have the ability to do that, right? In my opinion, right? Drupal does a lot of things great. I just posted a blog post over the weekend about how great Drupal is, but the perception of Drupal is not so great, right? And I think like Drupal CMS is going to be a big step in the direction of, hey, Drupal is really great and does a lot of things. And now, hey, marketers, you can build a website and have it be production ready, right? When you're done, right? I mean, I think that's something that it's striving to do. Whether it does that in the 1.0 version, I don't
It's
know, but like
interesting.
that's how the web works. We iterate, right? Okay, Martin. Well, you've clearly eclipsed all of your previous module of the week segments with this one because it was highly topical and very very informative. So thank you for bringing that to us. If folks wanted to connect or suggest a module of the week, how could they go about doing that?
We're always excited to talk about potential candidates for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly on all of the Drupal and social channels as Mandclue.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll see you next week.
See you then.
See.
All right. Let's move on to our primary topic. Okay, Jay. So we're talking about AI autonomy, AI agents, Drupal X. We're going to talk about a couple of different things here, all of which kind of focus on the AI space, right? I know you've spent 15 plus years at Drupal agencies. I'm wondering what makes you feel like you're able to talk about today's topic.
Oh man, yeah, I think I've got a lot of experience. I started working with Drupal. Man, I don't even remember what year, but it was like Drupal 4.6 or something was the version I started on. I've been doing enterprise Drupal. I started off doing kind of like freelance work on the side. I just loved Drupal as a technology in the early days. And I was doing a PHP job and it was fine. Then they started doing .NET stuff, and I'm like, I just want to do Drupal. I want to work from home, and so I was able to find a place where I could do that for a very long time. And so I've just been kind of like a Drupal addict ever since. Worked on a lot of big projects, been an architect, been had a number of different roles. I've spoken at a number of Drupal cons and camps and all that stuff. So I think and and I've been posting a lot more on LinkedIn. I used to never post on it. Now I post on it pretty routinely, and people I believe find that content valuable. So that includes just kind of post on AI. Sometimes it'll be like articles or thoughts. Sometimes it's actual like experiments demonstrating cool stuff. And so yeah, I think I'm qualified to speak on this.
Where did the or when, let me restate this. When did the interest in AI start, and how long have you been kind of working with that sort of stuff?
Oh, yeah, that's great. I mean, pretty much day one.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, ChatGPT came out and there was a lot of buzz, right? I think it's the fastest growing user base ever as far as going from like zero to like millions and millions of users. I
Yep.
think it was the fastest ever. And so I started playing with it. Now it seems like very crude by comparison. That first model that they released, which was like 3.5 or something like that, and just immediately saw like the utility of like, wow, this is incredible. Look at all this stuff. It blew my mind because I had heard about. To me, I just thought, okay, people talk about AI and stuff like that. Just seems like some sort of complex algorithms, stuff like that. I didn't really know that much about large language models as a thing because I just hadn't really looked into it. And so then ChatGPT came out, and then it really just opened the eyes of like the masses. And it's like, wow, you can do this cool stuff, and they're making it free. I'm like, I can't believe all this stuff. So immediately started playing with that. Immediately got, Copilot from Microsoft came out pretty quickly. So I started playing with that with coding, and I was just kind of hooked um, on the technology. It's just a very interesting technology, and so I didn't use it as much kind of year one as I did year two, where I really got into it even deeper, really trying to learn how to harness all this stuff. And it's just to me, it's just a very exciting technology, and I think I want to make the case that people need to not resist it. They need to like embrace AI for a variety of reasons we can get into. But yeah, that's how I got into it.
Cool.
So let's define some terms first, because AI, it seems like every single company and person is just slapping AI in front of something and trying to sell that. So when we say AI autonomy, what do you mean by that?
Well, so that was one word that I used in an article back in July. I think AI agents, like we're talking about, is probably a better descriptor at this point. And there's autonomy involved with AI agents. So it's supposed to perform more tasks without like direct input. So you'll have human in the loop basically, or you don't really have to, but a lot of the agents that you'll see will have a human in the loop doing things like confirmation, stuff like that. But it's doing a lot more kind of task driven, things on its own. And I think that's the direction we're heading. Obviously, it's not just, hey, I've got a chat interface and it kind of spoon feeds me a little bit at a time. It's like, no, I can actually tell it to do something and it can run off and do a bunch of things more on its own without as much human intervention.
Maybe to define for us is what is an LLM, a large language
Yeah.
model? What are the different ones
Well,
for what
okay.
we're
Well,
talking about?
I'm not an expert in large language modeling. I have found my niche is more in leveraging it. So, I know it's like it's math and vectors and it's doing all this stuff where they've like, they've trained the models on the entire web, and then they're able to take prompts. they've broken everything in the tokens. But for me, that's interesting. I haven't dug so deep into it to be able to explain it like super clearly, even though I've like listened to like every video on it. Um, but for me, a lot of it's sort of like magic happens, and then I get this awesome response. So I'm really trying to harness like it at the API level,
Mhm.
right? I know what it can do, and then I can harness that in my applications and everything. But yeah, I'm definitely not an expert in you know the the actual inner workings of how LLMs work. It's fascinating though.
Okay. And then is it safe to say that different language models are better suited for different things? So some may be really good at generating narrative content, others might be more suited for something like, coding assistance review.
Yeah, so, some definitely are better for coding. So I've tried almost all of them. Like I'm constantly evaluating models, and uh, I really like the Anthropic models the best for coding. And that's my main angle is using it as part of like developer workflow or as part of actual application scripting, doing similar stuff to what Jamie's team, the Freely Give guys, doing. I feel like they're doing similar stuff, and so, yeah, that's really my angle. I've tried, I've used the open AI models a lot. I'm really interested in the llama models because since they're open source, you have these companies, these startups like Rock and Fireworks. There's a bunch of them. And they're solving some problems at the hardware level as far as making things more efficient. And what you're seeing is like things are getting cheaper faster, which I like because that makes it very accessible. It's not just, oh, you got to have all this money to be able to leverage this, and therefore it's not for me. Like I think even as a small organization or an independent developer, you can harness these tools that in many cases are either free or cheap. Like they're so cheap they like might as well be free, and so that's very exciting to me. But yeah, I mean, the models will vary a lot. I think the models that you can run locally tend to not be very good at coding. They could probably be good with other things, but um, yeah, I like the big ones. Like Llama 3.3 is their latest. I like the Claude models a lot. But yeah, I mean, there's an ever expanding number of models, which again is exciting because I think it's making the whole thing like deflationary in terms of like cost.
So I'm curious, how do you, just kind of stepping to the side for a second, how do you evaluate these? Because I feel like to truly get a handle on some of these tools, you have to use them for a fairly, you can't just use them for an hour or two, right?
Yeah.
How do you quickly get an idea? And I'm not even talking about different tools, right? Claude versus Llama versus ChatGPT. Like they're releasing new models all the time too. Like, do you kind of have a go-to for testing what's
Yeah.
new in a particular model or in a particular service?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. One is just using the chat interface to try to do something, manually. So, that's how a lot of people interact with these models is just through chat. So it's like, okay, I've got Chat GPT or I have one of these things. They're helping me solve a problem. It's just this kind of manual, a lot of copying, pasting. I still do that. Or I leverage, I'll try the different models in Cursor. Cursor lets you select different models. You can see the strengths and weaknesses. But for me, like what the stuff I'm doing with Drupal X in particular, where I have some like AI tools, mostly the interactions are through Drush, just because it's the easiest way to kind of create a simple interface.
Mhm.
I really like to run them through that because I'll find there's a big level of there's big like divergence or difference between the different models. So I've got like a landing page generator, which is one of my favorite tools to use. It's just fun to use. I post a lot of those experiments on LinkedIn. And so it will generate a bunch of paragraphs and sample data and all this stuff and create like a whole landing page. Um, and you can tell the kind of the quality pretty quickly, or sometimes it'll error out. I mean, I've done all this kind of stuff to try to make it more robust with better error handling and all that stuff. at the application level. But yeah, that's a quick thing. I'm always trying to see what's the fastest, cheapest model I can get away with without any of these commands. Because if it's free or or virtually free, where it's like fraction of a cent to run these tools like over and over again, well, then it's accessible to pretty much everybody. And so I'll especially as new models come out, I'll run them through that, which is just configure them on my local to work with the Drupal X kind of tools, and run it through some of those tools and see how they do.
Okay.
Cool. You know, a little while ago, you mentioned, we need to just embrace the change that's coming. And in your blog post on the Drop Times, you suggest that, Drupal developers in general, jobs are going to be more about managing AI to create code. Can you tell us a little bit more about that in your thought?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think initially the kind of the first phase was, what we call like Copilot assistant, something like that, where you're using it like sort of like enhanced Google search sort of thing, where it's more efficiently giving you information that you plug in, or using Copilot or Cursor to help you write code in your editor. And that's like a good, it's a little buddy that's kind of helping you. But I mean, it seems obvious to me that it's already becoming more and more of a situation where it's doing things more independently. So Cursor right now just recently looked at this tool. I hadn't realized that they had released agents in the Cursor browser, but now, or in the Cursor IDE, now you can give the agent a task in a little prompt. I don't know if y'all played with that, but it'll create multiple files, and it can run command line commands. And so it can, I was playing with it to say, create a whole module. So it's doing a lot of tasks. Now it'll prompt you a bunch, which is kind of how we like to do it, because that gives you the ability. So it's got that human in the loop so that you can tweak things, because it doesn't always, um, you know, get it right. But I think it's clear that that's the trajectory we're on. And so from my viewpoint, we need to learn how to harness it, or we're going to get like replaced. Like I see this as the workflow where you're having it do a lot of the things. You're guiding it. That's more, and so not really a copilot, but more like I use the word, orchestrator or orchestrations, something like that. Like so you're guiding it instead of it guiding you. There's kind of a reversal there. I don't know if that's a perfect metaphor, but it seems clear that's the way it's going. The fear I know that I have, and I think many have, and it shows up in kind of cope on on social media, where they're just saying, no, it can't replace me. I'm like, I'm too important. I think we got to look at it with like clear eyes and be like, we've got to embrace this technology, we have to harness it, and we have to continually evolve to make sure we're staying ahead of what the AIs can do. Because like if the AI can do everything that you're doing, then you're going to be replaced. So you got to do things that the AI can't do or doesn't do like super efficiently. That's my view on it.
So it kind of sounds like you're saying the AI is coming for our jobs. Is that like a fair synopsis, or are you just saying, hey, listen,
I
you
want to
need to
dig into it.
elevate your skills?
Well, I want to dig into it, like, because so whose jobs is it coming for? In my view, anything that can be automated will be automated, right? And so I would be concerned, let's say someone who's a junior developer or whatever, who their main task at their job is taking something that's very prescriptive and executing. Well, AI can do that like right now. Um, and if if they can't do it right now, like how close are they? I feel like they're very, very close, depending on what tool you're using. There's some cost, but I mean, to me, the cost dynamics are way in the favor of the AI model. So I think you should be concerned if you aren't bringing things to the table that are beyond what just these models can do on their own. Maybe they're not perfect yet, but we can see the trajectories are getting better and better. I think there's like a Moore's law thing at place where every 6 months it's getting like, you know, a lot better, a lot faster, a lot
Yeah.
smarter. So what do you think?
I mean, I guess my like so I mean, I guess I'm of two minds here, right? So one, I kind of talked about earlier on with Scott's example of like, hey, this could be a good training tool, right? And you just mentioned it again, like, you know, a junior developer. I feel like we're harping on junior developers, which is unfortunate, but like a junior developer could potentially be replaced by AI, right? But part of me wonders, right? Like how complicated a prompt has to be to get an AI to write code as effectively as a junior developer could write code to solve a problem, right? So like does it does it become a savior that like hey, a prompt has to be too complicated for somebody to write to get the AI to develop the code the way a junior developer would, where I could say, hey, junior developer, here's the problem you're trying to solve. Go write the code to do it. I have to basically tell the AI too much, right? To be able to get them to produce the same level. Like, is that is that rational, or am I just kind of like trying to save junior developers?
I think maybe, although isn't a lot of times the challenge with junior developers is that they do need very prescriptive step by step. Because I know I've worked with developers at different levels for a very long time, and the junior developers that can do more work on their own tend to not be junior developers very long. That tends to elevate them to mid level because they are able to take direction and go off and do things versus developers where you do need to kind of spoon feed them. Um, like to me, uh, yeah, I mean, I think the AI is gonna if it can't do that now, which it feels like it can already. I mean, again, it depends on the tool that you use, but if it can't do it now, it's very close. And so, I mean,
Well,
I would be concerned. Yeah,
here's the thing though, as a counterpoint, I the thing is, you just said I think part of the critical flaw of this, and that is that junior developers, not everybody, but in general, junior developers become mid level developers and then become senior developers. And at at the current state that LLMs are, I don't see a way. Like you said, there are huge improvements, but there is a I forget the name of it, but it's one of those computer engineering laws where as you increase the CPUs or power that you're giving to an LLM and the amount of information you're feeding it, there's a limit that you can't break at the moment. And we've hit that limit several times, and we've hit the hard limit of the amount of information we can give, right? LLMs today are already getting every single thing that humans have ever
Well,
produced, and new information coming in is polluted by other AI models, so it can't be trusted, right? So we've hit that limit already. Um, are we going to be able to level up these AIs, so to speak, to the next level? And are we setting ourselves up for failure long term because we've replaced junior developers? But if you replace junior developers, there's nobody to become senior developers in the future when you need to debug
yeah.
these systems.
I mean, I agree. I agree with you 100%, Nick. Like I'm all for people in this case, right? But I mean, I think if you look at it from like a business perspective, right? Like granted, you know, I think developers have to kind of probably morph a little bit into um more critical thinkers on business requirements, right? As opposed to just people that develop code, right? Which is a skill set that can be taught. But I think like listening to what you just said, Nick, my thought was, well, if I'm a development manager and I need something built and like I have a choice of giving it to a junior developer or giving it to an AI that is a mid-level or a senior developer, right? What am I going to want to do? Well, chances are I'm probably going to want to give it to the AI that's a mid-level developer because it could potentially be cheaper or more efficient at producing the code, right? So I mean, I think that's going to be the problem that we have to try to overcome, is like, where's the business benefit other than, growing a person into that senior developer, and the things that you highlighted. But like, where's the benefit of not using the AI, or of
Well,
building that
yeah, no.
person
So,
up?
that's the other half of what I was getting to, right? So, one of the things that comes up on the show often is AI going to take our jobs? And we try to say like, oh, it's just going to change the jobs. But the truth is, if it takes any tier of developer job, it is taking jobs, because then that tier has to target the next level, right? The competition increases
Or
for
change,
a
right, to
smaller
be
pool.
Mhm.
just or
Well,
change to be effective, right?
yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, if everybody has to now become mid-level or higher, that means that there's more people competing for those same jobs,
Mhm.
which drives down salary. And there's knock-on effects that happen even if your specific particular job isn't taken by AI. If there's that pressure on the bottom side of it, there's
Yeah.
pressure everywhere. And so these are systemic issues that have to be solved somehow. We don't really know how it's gonna shake out at the moment. And on the other side, like you said, on the business side, what's the business decision for using AI versus not? And I think that's part of the problem here, just speaking kind of societally. We don't the question isn't really, is AI going to take our jobs? The question is, do businesses think that AI will take your jobs? Because if they think it will, they will give your jobs to AI. And
Well,
yeah,
so I think
maybe that crashes and burns in a few months and things kind of settle out. But
I do think
the
one of the big problems there, though, right, is like, from a business lens, like, there's a lot of liability. There's a lot of liability in saying, "Hey, this AI is going to develop this thing, and then we're gonna, test it a little bit, and then put it out to the masses," right? Because now you're responsible for that, right? So I think from a business lens, like, the liability is going to be a little bit of a shield for some uses of AI, and up until the
maybe
point where it gets better and more reliable enough that people feel comfortable with it. But um I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I don't know that we're gonna crack the code here, pun intended, on figuring out if AI is coming for our jobs. But I think, it's an interesting question, and has a lot of different angles.
I mean, I could talk about it forever, probably, unless y'all want to move on to another topic. I
until
think,
until AI until AI takes your ability to do that, right?
like, I'm kind of I'm of the mind of like, can't beat them, join them. I think whatever limitations they are, if you just look at the trajectory, and like, those things are going to be overcome. Maybe it will plateau. I haven't seen anything that looks like plateauing yet in terms of on the intelligence side, or there's some other cap, there's energy cap or whatever. Make no mistake though, the people building these and marketing them, they are marketing them to take jobs. That they will say, like Copilot will say, no, it's just your little helper. But definitely they're angling these to do the same things that developers do,
yeah,
like full time. So it'll be both. I mean, it'll, but if they can, in terms of like cost for businesses, a lot of times the staff is like the payroll is like the highest cost for a lot of professional service companies and stuff like that. So if you're able to take 10 developers and down to one using agents or whatever, I mean, it seems like a rational decision. You could argue kind of, around it, like ethics and moral or whatever, but they're just from a straight business perspective. If they can do the same output or even more with less, I don't see why they wouldn't do that. I think that's going to happen. So I'm just of the mind of, well, if I'm not going to be replaced, I've got to stay ahead of what the AI is doing.
I
And
feel like
so
they're
that's
gonna
kind of my
have to start, like, showing Terminator in business classes. Like, "Hey,
this is you.
you let Skynet out of the box. Here's what's gonna happen, all right?" Okay. Sorry.
All right. Switching gears a little bit.
Sure.
Tell us about Drupal X. What is
Yeah, so I've been working on Drupal X for a while now. So this is like a starter for Drupal. I've wanted it's really focused on solving different problems. Like for one of the main focuses, like the decoupled problem, where decoupled has been kind of a hot topic for a number of years. I feel like it's a little bit less hot these days, just because there's trade offs, with there's problems. Projects that I've worked on in recent years, I would be kind of unhappy with where we landed trying to build a React front end, whether it was Gatsby or Next.js. And so I decided to really take the time to dive in deep. And so I've done this for the last 6 months or so, and really try to create, to me, like the best like framework for this kind of enterprise decoupled um type of a starter, because I really like React. I don't like Twig at all. We could argue about that some. I do think I have a standard version of Drupal X as well that still tries to leverage Tailwind and some other things, and I think it does an effective job. Um, but to me, the React experience lets you do so much more, and so I'm really trying to make that like as good as it can be. And I also kind of merged my interest with all the AI stuff. So I've built in some AI tools and I'm going to be doing a lot with that this year and in the future, really moving towards, again, more autonomy. It just seems like the inevitable direction it needs to go, where we're able to do a lot of this site building and all these different things that are related to creating website using AI tools. And so, yeah, I mean, it's an exciting product, trying to create like a business around it, which is going to really lean into the AI solutions part of it. But I'm really trying to build something that's unique, that really solves some problems that other Drupal like distributions aren't really able to solve right now.
So how does it compare to, like, obviously Drupal CMS is out and in the wild. We've all seen, Dries's keynotes with AI in Drupal, right?
Mhm.
How does it compete or compare? I guess compare is probably a better term. How does it compare to like what the Drupal AI module is currently trying to achieve?
Yeah, so there is some overlap with the AI module, and I think that um I've been wanting to wait until it was fully stable, but there's a good chance I'm going to weave that into my stuff, to my tools. I didn't really so early on, months ago, I decided that I didn't want to tap into the AI module yet, just because I'm like, it's got to be such a moving target. Because I know the stuff I'm working on with all these AI tools are a moving target, and I didn't want to get into breaking changes all the time and just be running around having a hard time with that. But now that we're like at a stable version, I think there's a very good chance that I will create more, as far as my tools. I will do less of some of the back end stuff, as far as like the interactions with the models, and more leverage that module to do the talking back and forth with the models, and then also taking advantage of this like plugin type framework to create agents. So to me, like, the possibilities are endless there. So I definitely envision leveraging that, and then weaving that into my own kind of goals for the project, to do a lot more of these tasks um autonomously. Now, from the kind of user experience, we're just coming at it different angles. So Drupal CMS is trying to make it sort of easy for marketers, and the experience builder isn't going to be out yet. I didn't realize until I looked at recent news about it, that they're not ready yet with that. Even when they do, I think it's going to present some challenges for the decoupled side. So I'm really leaning into the decoupled side and trying to solve that problem. So the user interface in Drupal X is going to remain pretty simple, which is paragraph driven, and so it's not going to get into all that, where you're really trying to do more for marketer types to arrange things in Experience Builder. that's cool, that's great. That's not really the focus. For me, it's more on solving a lot of the hard problems related to building out the interfaces, the UX, taking Figma and converting that to highly performant, scalable, React front ends and all that stuff, and leveraging AI along the way. That's just so it's just like a different focus. I don't think there's the AI stuff, there's overlap, but as far as kind of what's the purpose of the platform or whatever, I think it's got a different audience.
So I kind of want to relate this back to AI a little bit because you've mentioned decoupled sites now a couple of times, and I think that one of the cool things about AI agents, moving forward is kind of interacting with content. Do you think that decoupled sites maybe have an advantage for providing their information about their site to a particular agent for whatever purposes that they're using it for? Because I think unless you're giving database access, most Drupal sites, AI agents will have to scrape the site. Whereas, if you have a decoupled site, you already have an API right there to describe your site. So have you looked at this at all? Or is this kind of
I guess I'm
a new
not
space?
completely sure I follow the question. What would be an advantage over from decoupled or
Yeah.
non-decoupled
So
in terms of content?
yeah. So what I was thinking about is like, I think one of the advantages that I'm thinking with AI agents is that you can ask information about your particular site,
Yeah.
right? And you can maybe, hopefully, in the future, kind of massage or modify or clean up content on your site. And if many agents will have to like kind of pull that content manually, I guess, or like figure out how to ingest that content manually. But with an API, with a decoupled site, you kind of already have predefined endpoints that you can kind of pull from and query the site for.
I'm not sure that's a limitation really, because to me the AI agents, they're running on Drupal. They've got access to me, I haven't looked at the code super deeply, but I imagine they've got access to all the entity API. Um, so
Oh,
I don't know if there is an advantage in terms of decoupled or not decoupled with the way the agents work, because they're built out in native Drupal. I think they have access to. So to me, the limitation with the chat interface is just it doesn't have write access. So Drush gives you some ability to do more stuff, but in terms of being able to write to content or
Mm.
configuration, I think it's got everything access to everything it needs, even in a standard build. I think.
I wonder, like, so if you take that question and frame it less about within one Drupal site and like communication between
Okay.
or sharing of information between Drupal sites, right? Or any
Yeah.
site for that matter, right? Like, does does the idea of decoupled websites make AI agents more appealing in the fact that it may be easier for them to get information than to have to like scrape a web page and try to like extrapolate what they need to from that?
I guess it just depends on exactly what you're doing. I don't see the limitation that you're seeing, because it's um because the AI agents are going to have access to all the content in your Drupal database. Like,
But not if
so,
you have two different Drupal sites. I think that's the point here, right? Is like AI agent one wants to get information
well,
from site two,
but it could
like
use an API. So you
yeah,
could have a standard Drupal site, but you just turn on the API just so it can talk to, like JSON API or something. Just turn it on so that it can talk with other Drupal sites. You know,
Yeah.
are there any
Yeah. And that was my question. Cause like,
yeah,
unless I'm doing something decoupled or something specific, I never turn on JSON API. Right. But if
right.
it's a decoupled site, you kind of have to, or GraphQL or,
Yeah, I'm
something
using
similar. So
GraphQL.
yeah, yeah. So those, that's what I'm thinking. Like those sites might have, yeah, the advantage is gone as soon as you turn on the module, I guess. But that's what I was thinking. Like it's just a simpler way. The other side of it too is like, yeah, they might have access to the entity API, but when you're setting up a decoupled site, you're gonna always set up custom routes, right? And so those custom routes kind of inform what's important for a particular site. And
Yeah.
so if the bot has access to something like that, they can see like, oh, these types of articles are more important because there's a special route exposing just that information for XYZ. Um, but yeah, maybe I'm reaching, maybe not.
Yeah, it's about I mean, that wouldn't be the argument I would make for decoupled. I think decoupled does have an advantage of being able to be like a content mesh for a bunch of sources. So you can have Shopify over here and it's fetching stuff from there. And Drupal is just this other content source. And so it's like using all these APIs and it's building this unified experience. Like that's one example of an argument. I don't think I don't look at it as AI agent is gonna be like better, in decoupled. I just look at it. To me, a lot of the advantages are more on related to just being able to do front ends and React and all that good stuff.
As as people start to um, use uh, AI more and more, and well, people in a managerial role like a development manager, are they going to be more AI prompt managers
Mm.
versus people managers? What do you think it'll look like
So,
for
like a
uh,
developer manager being
or
more
yeah?
like I don't know. I don't know what it's really hard to predict. I just think what's easy to predict is like things will change. Like they've already started changing. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
um developer workflow is changing. I just think it's hard to know exactly what that looks like, and so again, my emphasis has just been learn how to master these tools and use them to make yourself better and more efficient and everything else, and then hopefully in that way you insulate yourself some from like big career disruption. You want to be left behind. I was thinking you know, as an example, like graphic designers, when tools started coming out, Photoshop, Illustrator, like where they really needed to learn, and I think to this day, same kind of thing where you have to learn how to master these very technical tools to uh, to use with your craft. And if you don't, you're going to be left behind because they're going to become a hard requirement of like your responsibility. So, for Drupal developers, web developers broadly, I think you got to really find a way to harness this technology.
One of the things I think I tried to bring up this point, but it wasn't super clear before. But one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is kind of like global, I guess we call it skill decay, maybe. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on how to combat this, at least personally. And so let me kind of describe what I'm seeing. So when the first generation to get access to something, um, and let's just take the metaphor of the car, right? The first generation that gets access to widespread use of something like the automobile, they're all they all kind of become good mechanics. They kind of had to be, right? If you if you had the ability to get a car, they weren't that good in the beginning and they broke down a lot. So you had to be very rich and could hire people to fix it, or you had to learn how to fix it yourself. And you kind of understood how a car worked. And over the years, as cars became, I don't know if they'd be considered a commodity. uh, I don't know if there's like a price limit to that, but as they become better, like I've changed my brakes before, I've changed my oil before, but I don't really know how an internal combustion engine works or an electric car works. Like if I need those to be repaired, I have to go somewhere. And the same thing has become true of like computers, right? My generation, I mean, computers were around before my generation, but they really became widespread in my generation. And I broke more than my fair share of computers and had to learn how to fix them or wipe them and reinstall an OS and that kind of stuff. And you know, the generations after us, they've grown up more with much more user friendly and point and click applications, and so they haven't had the need to understand kind of the underlying principles. And AI to me kind of feels like the next stage, right? We're early in it. We'll learn, we'll know how the underlying pieces
Mhm.
work, but like, how do you, or is this not even a problem in your mind? How do we kind of combat the global kind of skill decay where like only very specialized people know? Like right now, only mechanics know how cars work, maybe
Yep.
engineers at car manufacturers, right? Or extreme hobbyists. Like, do we need to understand how the underlying stuff is working long term? Is that something that we have to think about? If we do have to think about it, how do we prevent that?
Man, that's a tough question to answer. I mean, you would think you should. Um, maybe if you're wanting some hope that you can hold on to your career and job, like I do as like a senior developer, it's like, well, we had all this knowledge that we invested in, and we've honed our craft, and so now we can leverage these tools, and we know what like good code is or not good code, and so maybe we have an advantage over new people coming up who are going to be super just reliant on the tools to spit out stuff, won't really know how it works underneath, and therefore you can run into pitfalls a lot because you're doing stuff that isn't good patterns, architecture, or whatever. But yeah, I think that's a real risk. I suppose you should say that even for a newer person that maybe that's just coming up through the ranks, that they still it still seems valuable to me to learn fundamental things, patterns, and things like that. To me, the syntax, memorizing all the syntax is less important than ever, which I am for, because that's one of the more tedious parts of being a developer is just learning a bunch of syntax. And so I like that the tools really make that a lot easier. Or thinking about like all the boilerplate code like Drupal spits out. That's one of the things that has aggravated me for a long time with all the symphony patterns. It's just like, how can you memorize all this boilerplate? So it helps you with that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a real risk that people coming up are going to be too reliant on the tools, and they won't learn the fundamentals, and therefore kind of the growth, trying to move up into more senior
Yeah.
roles and whatnot, that um that
I,
you get kind of stuck.
and I just want to clarify before we move on that I'm not necessarily saying that this is a huge existential problem. It's just something I've been thinking about a lot. Because, like I said, I don't know how a car works. I don't think that a lot of people really necessarily need to know, as long as the car works and they know how
Right.
to get it repaired and they know how to put gas in, right? I don't think each person needs to know how to maintain their own car. Well, beyond the basics, like keep air pressure and like that kind of stuff. Like you need to know how to take care of your tools, but you don't need to understand every last in and out of how the tool works. So I'm not advocating or saying that that is required, but it is something I've been thinking about a lot recently and wondering if there's something we should be trying to protect against as AI kind of gets more integrated and mainstream. But
It's interesting because, like, as you were describing that scenario, I was thinking of like, I'm gonna jump into being like a little bit of a Trekkie here, but like, I was thinking of like Star Trek, and I'm like, yeah, whenever there's a problem, it seems like everybody on that ship knows exactly how the computer and the engines work. And I'm like, that's pretty advanced technology. Like, of course, the chief engineer knows ultimately the most about it, but even right down to like the ensign, like driving the ship, like they know like all about how all those pieces work. I'm like, I think Nick wants to get there where everybody kind of knows enough about the starship to like get it to do what it needs to do, and fix problems when they occur.
and I think that's part of the skill though, is like how to debug not even debug, but like how to like approach a problem and begin to solve it. I think as a developer, that's the most important part of my job,
Yeah.
right? Aside from the architectural side of it, like when I'm writing something, like how do you even begin to approach this and debug it? Like what's if it's something I've never experienced before, how do I begin to get the information I need to find out where the problem is?
How to
And then,
figure out how to resolve
yeah.
intermix issues in your dilithium chamber. That's where you want to
I,
know.
the other thing that's really funny to me is it took me like whenever we talk about AI and the computer and Star Trek is like it took me until I think somebody on the show said it like the computer was like the pinnacle of AI and understanding, and they still had to like structure their sentences in this really weird, bizarre way to get hot tea. It, and and it's like the truth is uh, and they had to do that so that people could conceive like the computer was doing that. Like because really, like the pinnacle would be like, give me the usual, or even like it detects that you're thirsty and knows that this time of day you normally want a hot tea and just says, "Hey, your tea's ready." You go, "Oh yeah, thanks."
I mean, like,
Instead of having to be
let's
like,
be realistic. It would
"Computer,
it
tea
would very
Earl
much
Grey."
you're very much correct. It would very much be like, "Hey, computer, give me a tea," and it would go, "Oh, okay. Based on your voice, I know who you are and how you like your tea. Here you
Yeah,
go."
exactly. And it took until these things started becoming more realistic to even realize that, it was a little weird that they in the year whatever thousand, they programmed it to be such an archaic form of querying for something. But anyway, I digress.
I will say that I'm not going to say the name of it, but my virtual assistant right here in my house does already have that ability because in order to arm my alarm system, you can say this like big long phrase and it will do it. And I was like, oh God, this is like so much for me to say. So I've shortened it to a much shorter phrase that's fun and easy to say, and it works great. So, I think we're already there. Jay, in getting ready to wrap here, one last hypothetical question, and I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway and see what your thoughts are here. I'm wondering, like, for the CEO or the development manager or the upper management, high level, C-level position person listening to this right now that's thinking like, "Oh boy, I know enough about how my company runs, or I know enough about how development works and like what needs to be built. I don't need any more developers. I'm going to move everything to AI." Like, what do you say to that? What's the I don't know. I don't know necessarily know if it's an argument, but how do you like kind of talk that person back from the ledge?
Mm. Well, so I'm not sure CEO would do that necessarily. But now they could shrink the team. I think that's a much more realistic scenario because why would you need a full team if less people can do the same amount of work with tools and you come out way ahead because you're leveraging. Yeah, I think we had similar conversations about like outsourcing and things, and people would say, well, outsource, there's all these constraints that can't do it. And that's, they don't speak English, they're not in the time zone, so on. So a lot of over time, a lot of those problems got solved. And so
Mm.
jobs got moved overseas, sometimes entire teams, sometimes hybrid, so on and so forth. I think if you want to look at it from a more kind of positive lens, you could say there's a lot of startups that are happening right now that are just a couple people that are able to do cool, disruptive things. Before that was not even possible. It's like, okay, well, you're going to need a team of 10 developers and so on and so forth. Like, I think the guys who did Cursor, was just like a few people and it's like this really big, startup that's worth $1 billion or something. So it's like it. So if you want to be more on the optimistic side, you can say, well, it's cool because people are able to do a lot of work with just like one or two people,
Mm.
and have enough of a proof of concept or whatever to start to get funding and stuff, and then you have a real blown startup. Like, that's the very cool, exciting. That's the part of the future that I want to be part of. The more depressing part is where you do have existing companies that are saying, hey, well, let's look at the budget. Oh, okay, we can, we spend a lot of our technology. A lot of organizations, that's a huge part of their budget, should continue. But it's like, okay, well, what if we can do more with less? I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's a pretty rational decision. And so I'm concerned because I'm in that field. We're all in that. It could be a game of musical chairs at some point, especially when you have economic turbulence, things like that. You want to be not on the outside looking in. And so, yeah, I mean, there's two different ways to look at it. I try to stay on the positive side because I want to be positive, but you also have to just be real with yourself and say, okay, I can't settle on my skills that I learned in 10 years ago. It's like I've got to keep on learning, keep getting better. Developers should be curious and wanting to learn more all the time. I've got to stay ahead of the technology or I will get replaced.
All right. Well, Jay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Do you have any questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter or Blue Sky with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and clicking that Become a Patron button in the sidebar. Jay, if folks wanted to get a hold of you, how could they best go about doing that?
Really, everything's happening on LinkedIn right now. That's the channel where I've found it's really, easy, is like really fun to connect with people. So I've been putting out a lot of content in there. People add me to their network all the time. I talk to people on there. Still working on the Drupal X marketing website that'll be up soon. But yeah, if you're interested in some of the stuff that I'm working on, I think LinkedIn is a good place. So maybe we could provide a link to my profile page.
Sure. Scott, what about you?
I can be reached most easily on Drupal Slack. My username is Scott Weston, very cleverly enough.
There you go. Simple. Nick, how about you?
You can find me pretty much everywhere at NixVan, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me at picozzi.com or on all the social medias and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out more about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. See you guys next week.
Thanks, everyone.